Good morning, everyone. Thanks for tagging along. Today we're going to walk north of the village and do a quick circuit of the hamlet of Woolstone.
Well, the first phase of our journey is going to take us across this barley field. There's two villages here. There's Gotherington and there's Bishop's Cleeve, and they're separated by this barley field. And there's no actual pavement joining the two places. So if you wish to walk from Gotherington and access the post office or the chemist in Bishop's Cleeve, this is where you have to go. You have to come and teeter along the edge of this field, which is fine in the summer, but in the winter it can be a bit of a morass. So although it's kind of a shame that there's going to be a proper asphalt road, it's in the end probably a bit of a relief to the villagers. This is Gotherington. We're just cutting through a back alley here. Like most villages in Gloucestershire, it's a fairly standard layout. It's 3 small lanes that converge on a war memorial. But I like taking this alleyway because it's a fun little route, and I've enjoyed watching this guy on the left. Can you see that little white house? A chap who lives there has been doing a Herculean job doing up his garden, and he's even rebuilt that dry stone wall we're walking next to. For about half a year, every time I've walked down this alley, that has just been rubble, and he put up some string as guidelines and has gradually rebuilt it, which is extraordinary because dry stone walling's a hell of a job. You've got to be taught how to do it, but evidently he's got the knack. The fun little thing about this alley, this is what they call a corpse road. In medieval times, there would be routes, some sort of ceremonial routes that people would take with a coffin when somebody died. They'd have to carry them across the field to the churchyard. In this case, if anybody died in Gotherington, I guess they'd have to carry them to the big church in Bishop's Cleeve because it had a graveyard. And we know this route by its name. It's called Church Lane or Coffin Walk, which does indicate that it was one of these old medieval ceremonial routes. And a bunch of these places, they have what they call corpse stones along the route. They look like sort of stone benches that people would have used to rest the coffins as they carried them to the churchyard. And on several pathways around here in the fields and the hills, there are stone benches that look like they could have been used for that kind of purpose, but it's hard to know for sure. It's like most of the sort of agricultural kind of working class aspects of life, because nobody wrote any of it down. There's no record, so we can only just guess that that's what that stuff was used for. It's a warm day, but a windy day. We've had a heat wave lately, a bunch of days above 30 degrees, which in England is rough because it tends to be humid. Now, this is the first phase of our route, the new bit of the route I'm exploring. Because I walk around the side of Crane Hill, which is where we're going. I've done it a bunch of times, but I've noticed on the map there's a few little quirks, a few little squiggles in the footpath that I haven't explored, and they don't amount to much, just more than a few hundred yards, but the paths I haven't walked, and this is one of them. It just cuts diagonally across the field, and if I can make the route work, which it does, then it'll save me clambering over a couple of really awkward styes, so glad to have found a slightly easier route. That little dribble of a stream there, that's Tile Brook. And it collects the water that runs off the hill here, Crane Hill. And that in turn feeds into the river Swillgate. And all the water there heads sort of west, and it's all part of the confluence of little streams and rivers that tends to flood the village of Tewkesbury during the winter. Town of Tewkesbury, rather. This little town with an abbey, and they have terrible problems. They're basically built beneath a floodplain, so it's almost like a semi-submerged city. We're heading up to Woolstone. Most of the farmers around here do it old school. They rotate their crops. This was fallow for several years, and for a couple of years it was corn, which would grow 6 foot high, so walking through that was fun. It was like being in a maze. And this year it appears to be wheat. I'll have a brief stop on the bench in St Martin's in Woolstone. Can't really see it there, but that church steeple is quite spectacularly crooked because a lot of these churches aren't built on proper foundations. I just stopped to set my boot straight. I do intend to go in that church and have an explore, but I'm not going to do it today. And I'd love to learn more about the graveyard here because there's some really interesting gravestones, but I can't find anything online that has the history. I mean, this one here appears to have what looks like Masonic symbols. It looks a bit like that pyramid on the back of a dollar bill. Now, what properly interests me here is they have some very old gravestones. In Cotswold churchyards, you'd be lucky to find anything from the 1700s. It's mostly 1800s onwards. We've got these really old looking gravestones here, and they appear to be made of the local Cotswold stone, which unfortunately weathers fairly quickly. So after a couple of centuries, the inscriptions on them are pretty indistinct. I mean, that one, there's pretty much nothing to see. I mean, maybe if you sort of jet hose the lichen off it, you might be able to read something. But this one over here seems to have something fairly distinct in Latin. I wish there was some way of finding a translation. I'm going to head down the hill a little bit to the western side of Crane Hill. Just nosing over a hedge there, because that's Woolstone Orchards, which is a pick-your-own outfit. You can go and fill a punnet, I think, with strawberries, certainly with apples. Well, I see we're just going to head down this lane here, past this house, of which I am utterly envious. It's one of those plain, wonderfully symmetrical Regency-style houses. You can well imagine somebody using it in a Jane Austen adaptation, having coach and horses pull up at the front. Well, now at the end of the lane we head through this gate and then we can get onto the hillside proper. It's a very shallow hill. I mean, even the term hill seems a bit grand for it. It's just a bit of an incline, really. But it's nice to walk across the top here. And I've always got to keep my eyes peeled because this sort of side of the hill has a few hedges, and that makes it perfect for birds of prey. I've seen kestrels catch mice. I've seen buzzards and red kites. But not lately. Like I say, we've had a bit of a heat wave, and I think by the time I'm out and moving around, they're all sitting in a tree, chilling. Got to be out early morning or early evening if you really want to see the birds of prey. This is more barley, I guess. And I am guessing. I think wheat is the more sort of whisker-like fronds. This looks more like barley. And it's lovely just to walk through it. It has this sort of oceanic quality that when the wind passes over, you can see waves pass through it. This is the sheep field on the edge of Oxington. Oxington's another tiny village, and by tiny I mean absolutely minuscule. There's no amenities or anything, it's just a cluster of cottages. And this is going to be the second part of my little bit of exploration. There's the tiniest of pathways recorded on the Ordnance Survey map that should go to a gate on the other side of that field there, you can see in the tree line. But just standing in the field looking around, I can't see any route through. Which is no big deal. I mean, we're just talking about a tiny little spur on the public right-of-way, something that's only about 100 yards, but I guess it's lapsed. We have this wonderful organisation called the Ramblers in the UK that conducts legal action to make sure these rights-of-way stay open, but I think that one could have properly fallen into disuse. Well, lunchtime. Might as well go and sit in the precincts of St John the Baptist, Oxington. Because this is properly secluded. There's no houses around here. I mean, there's sort of one big one over the hedge there, but this is really a fairly remote church, surrounded on all sides by fairly high vegetation, so you wouldn't know it was here. It doesn't feel used. It feels almost out of time, like a sort of, almost like you've stumbled across an old Roman temple. And the churchyard here is very uneven ground, simply because it's so disused, so unpeopled, that rabbits, even deer, use it as almost like a nature reserve. So now I've got to wander through the village. Well, again, I say the village, it's just a row of fairly quaint cottages down this lane. Apparently, although Oxton is a tiny village, at least 22 of the buildings here are what they call listed. That means they exist on a government register. They're protected as bits of national heritage, which is lovely bragging rights, I guess. If you have a house, you can say it's listed, and it's almost like saying you're living in a castle. But I knew somebody who had a house like that, and they wanted to put an extension on the side, and the kind of legal shenanigans they had to go through to get permission for that was incredible. There's crows in the field there. Don't know if you can see that. There's 3 farms side by side here. There's Crane Hill Farm on the side of the hill. Then there's Middle Farm, which is sort of in the lower slopes. And there's this one, which I'm walking through for the first time. This is the third of my little sort of deviations from my usual route. And this is called Lower Farm. And if you live somewhere like Australia or Kansas, I mean, these farms are just so tiny, it's comical. Probably wouldn't even regard them as farms. You'd think of them as just extended gardens. But these place names like Lower Farm and Middle Farm, they do remind us that before cars, when movement was a lot more difficult, that this would have been, for many people, their universe. The agricultural workers, the farmers, this would have been their whole world. They would have lived and died in these few fields. Now I'm slightly thwarted because I'm almost back to the road I want to reach, but I'm facing a field of cattle. And normally I don't mind. I can sort of skirt along the edge, but these cattle here are incredibly curious, very friendly, but the moment I set foot in that field, they were converging on me to try and check out what I was about. And cows are big and clumsy and stupid, and so am I, and that's a bad mix. So I'm taking a different route back to the lane, climb back up the hill again. We're heading home now, having done a circuit. That's a comma butterfly. I don't think I'd ever seen one of those before. According to Wikipedia, those comparatively rare in the 1970s, but their number's been gradually rising thanks to climate change. It's one of the sort of bits of wildlife that has welcomed slightly higher temperatures. And so I head back to Coffin Lane, or Coffin Way. Well, that's about a 5.5 mile walk. It's a respectable distance. So I guess I'll just head home for a cool drink.
Well, I'm going to head on home now. Thanks for tagging along. I'll see you soon.